Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this panel on Rethinking Leadership for a Digital Age. My name is Haneen, and I'm currently an advisor at the Ministry of Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship in Jordan, and I'll be the moderator for this session. We talk about leadership and the digital age quite a lot, and when it comes to leadership, we're constantly bombarded with messaging around ways to cope, the best tools to use, ways to manage, culture and whatnot. And then when we talk about the digital age, it also feels like a loose term, right? Some refer to it as the information age. Others refer to it as, an age where technology and information are becoming big parts of our lives. In this panel, we're going to focus on the digital age during the pandemic and the way it affects leadership, especially as it relates to the human element. We'll discuss topics such as inclusion and exclusion, digital well-being and culture, communication, and the impact of this accelerated transition on productivity. The objective of this panel is not to get you out with a prescriptive list of how to lead in a digital age, but really to get you to rethink certain aspects of leadership in the midst of the pandemic and beyond. First off, let me start by introducing the wonderful panelists. And meanwhile, we'd appreciate if you can answer the poll. You'll find it below, and we want to get to know you too. So the technical moderator is going to post poll number 1 on where are you from. First off, we have these admirable group of leaders who came from diverse backgrounds, each of which bring such a unique lens on leadership and the digital age. Let's start by introducing Salma Al-Yasser. Salma is a management professional with over 30 years of experience in both the private and development sectors. She has worked with refugees in Lebanon and led programs on health, gender, disabilities, and education. And over the course of her career, she served in several senior management positions. She's a consultant and a trainer on adaptive leadership and is a certified coach on immunity to change, both of which are Harvard-developed frameworks. She also volunteers on several non-for-profit boards, and she is the co-founder of Womenez, an organization that supports women in navigating menopause and regaining control. Hello, Salma. Thank you for joining us. And we need to point out that Salma is joining from Canada, and it's 5:30 a.m. where she is, so thank you so much. Next, we're going to introduce Dr. Anastasia Dedyukina, who's dialing in from London. Anastasia is a TEDx speaker and author of the best-selling book, Homo Distractus, and a global expert in digital well-being. She's a founder of the London-based Tech Life Balance Consulting, Consciously Digital. Anastasia runs a network of over 100 coaches that focus on digital well-being training. Anastasia is a frequent speaker at global conferences such as GSMA's Mobile World Congress, and she frequently appears in the national and international press, including BBC, ITV, Metro, Guardian, among others. And our third panelist is Roberto Cracci. Roberto is joining us from the UAE, and Roberto is the managing director at Microsoft for Startups, covering the Middle East and Africa. Roberto focuses on helping startups create and achieve tech goals in the Middle East. His professional background is in the business side of tech, whereby he worked for tech giants such as Google and was acting as a Google regional head for EMEA's emerging markets, where he was helping businesses by building and mentoring teams that could successfully penetrate new markets and ensure sustainable revenue growth. We have a fourth panelist that's supposed to join us, but we're hoping that he was, and his name is Professor Timothy Patrick McCarthy. I'm going to go ahead and introduce him, and we'll wait for him to join the panel. Professor Timothy is an award-winning historian, an educator, and a human rights activist who has taught on Harvard's faculty since 2005. He currently holds a joint appointment at the Graduate School of Education at Harvard and the Kennedy School of Government, where he teaches arts of communication. He has published 5 books and is frequently as a frequent media commentator, whose work has been featured on The Salon, Huffington, the Daily Beast, The Nation, NPR, Al Jazeera, among others. He's also a chair for Free the Slaves, a leading global NGO in the fight to end modern slavery. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Salma, Roberto, Anastasia, and hopefully Tim, who will be joining us soon, for joining today's conversation. I'm aware that tonight we have a heavy participation with people joining from different parts of the world and from different professional backgrounds and industry. Welcome, everyone. I'm truly honored to be moderating this session. But before we dive in, let's just go over a few house rules. All attendees are going to be put on mute. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and we'll have time allocated towards the end of the session to take questions. Throughout the panel, we'll have a few poll questions that we'll post, and please stay aware of them. We really appreciate your insights. And I'll let you know once we have a poll coming up. Please answer it as fast as possible so we can incorporate your answers into the conversation. All right, let's get into it. It's safe to say that most of us have witnessed, to some degree, good leadership, whether it's at home, at work, or even from behind a screen while looking at some documentary or something. But let's face it, we've also come across some not so good leaders. So on this very high note, my first question to each of the panelists is, what is not leadership? And what are some common pitfalls that leaders fall into that you've seen from your experience, especially during the pandemic? We'll start by Dr. Anastasia.
Thank you for having me, first of all, and hello, everyone. I often talk about how digital leadership is misunderstood because time and time again, digital leadership is defined as let's introduce new digital tools and they're going to work in the company. And that's unfortunately not how things work. I don't know if you ever have seen any digital tool that works the way that it's supposed to work. I haven't. And I've worked for about 20 years with different companies. So I think it's a big misunderstanding about that digital leadership should still be about people, not technology, and understanding how people should interact with technology and where, in my opinion, technology complements people as opposed to drives the process. That's my personal view.
Thank you so much. Next, Salma, what are your thoughts on that?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me. It is a little early in the morning, so please excuse if I'm not very clear. So in my own experience, the biggest pitfall in leadership is really resistance to change. People normally like doing what they know how to do. And when something forces itself on them, there is enormous resistance to change. And I mean, that is part of the reason I got interested in this field of work. And this is not exclusive to technology. It is across the board, but with technology in particular, there is a huge resistance. And I would totally agree with Anastasia that this is a real challenge in getting people to use technology and how to leverage it to the best in the best possible way. It is in big part because we have this kind of resistance to anything that challenges the way we do things.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Roberto, what are your thoughts on what's not leadership and some common pitfalls?
Sure. First of all, again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure sharing the time with you, all of you today. And congrats to Salma for connecting at 5:30 a.m. This is really awesome. So first of all, let me say, I will start saying I totally agree with Anastasia and Salma. Probably here in this panel, I represent the technology, right? I've been working for such a long time in technology with Google, Microsoft now. And the key takeaway I have is that it's almost never about technologies. It's almost always about people and how you create, awesome teams, how you focus on the users, how you focus on your employees. This human-centered kind of approach. To me, pitfalls in leadership. So I would say number one is very often leaders, misunderstand their role and they think it's about themselves. And it's almost never the case. It's not about themselves. It's about the others, right? So that's number one. The number two is pitfall is also leaders think that they should be doing a good job, and of course that's the case, but it's not. That's not enough. They also should come out as being vulnerable, and that's okay, being human. And the third point I would mention is. That one of the pitfalls is that some leaders think that they should have all the answers. So they don't feel comfortable when they don't have the answers. Whereas I think leadership should be about asking the right questions and serving others.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so maybe on a more positive note, right? You guys have all been you're leaders yourselves, you've worked with many leaders, and what is the most exciting thing that you've come across when practicing or learning about leadership? Like something, are there any timeless practices in leadership? Salma, would you like to start?
I think there are 2 or 3 points that I'd like to make with regards to this. The first one would be the difference between authority and leadership. So oftentimes people really mix up these 2 things. Sometimes leadership does need authority and sometimes it doesn't. And leadership can come at any level in an organization, whereas authority is usually fixed at the top. But understanding the difference between these 2 things is something very important. And I think one of from my perspective, one of the main things that I have come to differentiate through my practice. The other thing is the importance of understanding the underlying fears of people. What do they have to lose? And that ties in with the whole concept of why do people have a resistance to change and immunity to change? It's because they have something to lose at some level. And so a good leader needs to understand what are the underlying fears for people and why they are resisting. So it's not a kind of top-down type of leading, but really understanding and asking the right questions, as Roberta said, and also creating an environment where people can collectively solve a problem. So it's not the leader with the answer coming. And I think there's a huge misconception with what leaders are, right at the forefront, everybody following. I think leadership from behind is what I would say one of the things that I learned about leadership and how to lead.
Excellent. Yeah. And I love that, the distinction between authority and leadership. And I think a lot of people kind of mix the 2 together. Anastasia, what are your thoughts? How about Roberto? You want to go ahead and answer until...
Sure, absolutely. So I kind of elaborate on what Salma was just saying to take that to the next level, so to the aspect of making that actionable. Meaning, when I was at Google, for example, we did a study to understand the science of building successful teams as leaders, right? So, and what came out is that the number 1 factor to create successful team is something called the psychological safety, which means as a leader, you need to create the environment where you include your team. And now in the, let's call it a digital age, or let's call it a post-pandemic or pandemic or whatever, COVID-19, but it's probably more difficult because the teams are even more remotely distributed and all connected through digital. But the concept is the same, is making sure that you are able to have all of your people bringing their own self to work, making sure that you have people that come to work bringing their self, but also contributing or challenging the status quo, asking questions. They don't have this fear that Salma was mentioning because of authority, because of the performance management system, because of the culture, because of many, many different factors. So the job of the leader, and where I see for example, at Google, this was really taken care of and was really something important for a company, was build that environment of psychological safety where you can create high-performing teams. You can get this discretionary effort from your people because you are inspiring them, but you're allowing them to show their own self and don't have any, shame or any fear of showing up as they really are. So for me, this is one of the most important aspects that I would mention.
Thank you for sharing. Anastasia?
Yes, well, not to repeat what has been said already. A great leader is not only the one who is listening to people, but also the one who listens for their suggestions. So not just the concerns, but suggestions. Yeah, I think with the pandemic, there is a perfect example. Companies hear people saying they're concerned about working from home. What are the solutions they're offering? Very often these solutions have nothing to do with what people need. I'll give you an example. People like a company we were working with, they raised the concern about feeling stressed and insecure. What did the company do? They signed them up for a meditation app. Yeah, meditation app is great, but having some job security, or having an opportunity to work from home without children running around is probably going to make a bigger difference. So in this case, it's a nice perk to have, but probably if the company listened a bit more attentively to the suggestions and actually to what people need, that would be great leadership. And the second one, the one that's not to forget, is a vision. Yeah, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we spending 10 hours a day or whatever time you're spending in front of the computer, sending endless emails? Many people lose track of that, right? Especially because in these days, we have such a small piece of work we're focusing on, we don't have the bigger picture. So it's the job of the leader to hold the bigger picture for everyone and really to show it and say, hey, yes, you're just part of that, but this is why we're doing this. You're not just meaninglessly moving information from one Excel spreadsheet to another.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. Those are great insights, and I'm sure the audience, if they were unmuted, would really express their appreciation. So to just shift kind of focus, we talk about, how this pandemic has forced us to adopt digital means, whether or not we were ready for it, we were just, right into it. It wasn't the most organic transition. And we, and leaders and people tend to use the term inclusion so generously. We toss it around like a fireball, right? And yes, we've all been impacted by the pandemic, but which categories of people were affected the most, right? And we asked this question now to the audience in real time, and I gave them 3 options. Not that these are the only options. There's so many categories, of people, but we told them, is it people with disabilities, people who are younger employees, who are kickstarters of their career, who are, unable to be onboarded, or is it working mothers? And most of our answers, most of our audience think it's working mothers that are the most impacted, right? So Salma, this is my next question is to you. You've extensively worked with underserved communities, whether refugees or females in underserved communities. In your opinion, who are we excluding, and how can leaders address this exclusion?
I think in our kind of what's the word? Falling in love with technology and how it can solve so many problems in the world at a high level. We get really excited about it. I mean, I get excited about it. But when we do things like, for example, online schooling, we assume that people have access to the technology that is necessary to actually do this online learning, right? In my experience, there are many underprivileged homes that have maybe one smartphone and maybe 5-6 children, and then the children have to learn online, so each one of them has to use this one phone. So the idea of technology is very seductive, but the reality of it is very exclusive of some underprivileged communities. And we have to, I think one of the challenges of using technology as a panacea for all our problems is keeping in mind the idea of leveling the playing fields, really. I mean, not everybody has access to electricity, for example. I mean, I come from a country, which is Lebanon, right now going through an economic crisis, has electricity cuts. Maybe sometimes it is 2 hours, electricity is only 2 hours a day, plus, the people who are economically disadvantaged to start with are now far more economically disadvantaged, and so on and so forth. So you talked about working mothers, for example. We look at technology, wouldn't it be wonderful, giving the mother a flexibility to stay at home and work from home. The reality of it is, in most cultures, I would venture to say, even in the West, it is the mother who's running around doing the shopping and running after the kids, and they come to mommy all the time, and how it's very different. And we still have that image of what a professional is, somebody who is kind of cut off from their family, to Roberto's point of showing up as your authentic self, not just as a professional, but as a mother or a father, or the other parts of you that make you human, make you whole. These are not really still very accepted. I mean, we kind of smile at I remember this video, YouTube video of the guy who's on, having this online interview, and the kids run in and the mother is taking them. The mother, again, is trying to keep them away from the camera. But this is the reality of our lives, right? When we show up as professionals, often we paint this picture that's only part of us. And so for people from a disadvantaged, and I would include mothers with small children as definitely people with challenges, shall we say. Of course, fathers as well, but I mean, speaking realistically, what is happening in the world is that mothers are the ones who are taking the big part of the weight or the heavy lifting. So keeping that in mind when we talk about technology, and so when technology becomes an additional burden, right? So it can be a liberator, but it also can be a prison. We have to be aware of that, I think.
And may I chime in, Hanin, on this, because it's a very relevant topic that is also close to my heart. So first of all, commenting on the lines of what Salma was saying, I'm also a father of two, and they are kind of in their young age. So we have been living this pandemic, and I can witness firsthand how hard it has been for my wife taking care of these two at the same time, and we still live in privileged condition, right? So what Salma was referring to is we never think that there is a big digital divide in between our our Western society versus other communities where maybe they don't even have electricity, maybe they have a large number of kids, and so they've been impacted seriously about that. So and I agree with the point, and this probably becoming repetitive, but I think it's really key. It's not about technology. Think about it. Think about, we mentioned, for example, online learning, so the distance learning. So it's not that the technology to do the distance learning did not exist before. At the end of the day, schools are using, repositories, online repositories, and, video communication technologies that were already there a few years ago already. So, but it's the fact that they are not really taking into consideration, and probably they didn't have the time, but there you see the short-term thinking. They're not taking into consideration the full experience, the whole experience. It's not just about, it's not about taking things online. This is what most schools did. And honestly, as a parent, the experience was in average awful, because there were things that didn't make sense to do online. Like I had my son that was attending the PE class, and the teacher was asking each kid to do the jumping jack for 1 minute. So basically he was watching 25 minutes of other kids doing the jumping jack, and it's not PE, right? So, and this is nonsense. But this is just an example. So it's not about moving things from offline to online. It's about reimagining the experience that you are providing to users through technology. So technology comes after you really understand users, people, humans in their circumstances. And to touch base on the categories you mentioned, so working mom, of course, this is something I witnessed myself. So that's definitely a category that has been impacted. But also I would say, when we mention underrepresented, other underrepresented categories, so we don't have to forget that if we don't design for accessibility and inclusion, it's like saying to every fifth person who walks in your door, I don't really want your business. So it should be exactly the opposite of what happened so far. So in the past, people had to adapt to the world because there was no opportunity to. In the future, the world will adapt to you because with the new means, new technology, yes, there are opportunities too. I'm personally working with a startup who developed this hardware for people of determination to enable them to access in a more friendly and accessible way for them their devices, to make sure that they could go through online courses and complete them, because this hardware is just very colored, is very, it's something that they can really use. This is an example. So and technology companies got it because when we build new products, we are factoring this in to build for everyone.
the thing is, there are still part of the population with no access. So this is where probably we need to invest. But there have been already studies showing that companies that embrace best practices for employing and supporting persons with disabilities, for example, in the workplace, outperform their peers, because it's all human beings that have skill sets, capabilities that can contribute to. So it's just creating the environment to allow them to access and give them the opportunity.
Amazing.
Can I just jump in on that point? Because I've also worked with people with disabilities and other, as you mentioned, other disadvantaged communities. So part of leadership is having the courage to actually go that extra mile and take that risk and take that challenge and allow what is different into your workplace and making it work. So in my opinion, that is part of leadership as well. So thanks for mentioning that, Roberta.
Oh, excellent. And this is a great segue into the question we asked the audience. We asked them, you know, on your points, is it happening to us, or are we leading it? So we asked our audience, are we the ones adapting to technology, or is technology adapting to us and our needs? And interestingly enough, most of our 75 of our audience thinks that we adapt to technology. And this just kind of makes me think of, are we losing power to technology, or, you know, and is it, and Anastasia, I know you have some thoughts on that, so please go ahead and share.
If I may just jump in, I would like to ask Anastasia, can you tell us what consciously digital is?
Sure, yes. So basically, we are a network of international coaches that work with companies on their digital culture, exactly making sure that it's you who are managing technology, not the other way around. And this started from my personal story working in digital marketing, actually, in one of the top tech companies Roberta was working for. And in London, then getting rid of my smartphone because I was feeling overwhelmed, and I was sitting in the same room with people. We were not talking to each other, and we were talking to each other on Skype, okay, in the same room. So this is an example of what digital culture is, or rather what it should not be. And I was thinking something was wrong with me, so I took a break, and then I figured out, no, this is actually where I can help from the coaching perspective, and just one thing followed the other. But to your question, we talk a lot about like creating the culture of the company, but we don't talk about creating the digital culture. And the thing is, our technology tools, they're not necessarily neutral, right? They impact our behavior in a particular way, but very few companies are conscious about this. And I'll give you a very simple example, right? Pandemic, I have a neighbor, a young starter, 25-year-old, who just changed his job. He hated his old corporate job, so he joined a new company. He felt very excited about this, but because of the pandemic, he has not been to the office and he has not seen his colleagues live. So he introduced himself on the screen to 50 people, and all of these people had their videos off. How do you think he felt? And he was sharing with me, and he was like, look, you know, it's so weird. Like, is it something wrong with me that I'm talking to the screen and there are 50 people? And I bet these 50 people probably were not listening to him, but they were probably sending their emails. They were very busy. What kind of signal is it sending? You know, and I think there needs to be like part of the leadership in the digital age is to really think about these things, as small as they are. And I think one of you mentioned leaders don't have all the answers. No, you know, you cannot envision all these things, but, you know, keep asking people, keep tracking what's happening to them. If you're a CEO and you're sending an email at 10 p.m. Saturday night, what is the signal you're sending to your employees? Yeah? Is this telling them, hey, you will be appraised and promoted based on how soon you open your emails outside of the working hours? Is this really the culture you want to create? Or do you want to put a little note that says, well, I'm working flexibly, I'm checking my emails when it's convenient for me. I do not expect you to do the same. There are small things, but they make a big difference. So every time we're adopting a technology, it does change our behavior and how we relate to each other. And that's going to be like the major challenge for leaders.
And
next 10 years?
I 100% agree with what you are saying. For example, the big issue I see, for example, let's talk about this working from home, right? Working remotely. That's not a real thing. I mean, meaning the thing is, if leadership in that organization is not updating the way people are evaluated or the way they look at performance, it doesn't make sense. It's not about technology. This technology to work from home exists since 10 years or more. So that's not something new. Is that a lot of organizations have been discovering this all of a sudden, but that show how short-term is their leadership because they didn't update their performance management, and they still reward. This case about some leaders sending these emails late night during weekends is just a practice, right? And people believe that if they don't behave like their leaders, then they're not rewarded in the same way. That's all wrong. People should be rewarded on outcomes, on impact, maybe even more social impact going forward. People should be rewarded on the real impact that they make. Who cares about if you've been staying in front of your laptop for 8 hours? That's a metric that maybe was relevant at the time it was created because it was a different world. But probably at the time didn't make sense, but it still doesn't make sense today. So, so the point is the point is a lack of leadership there more than anything. Before talking about technology, is the leaders of those organizations are not thinking really about their employees, and then I doubt they're even thinking about their customers as human beings, and so they're not. Therefore, they're not really changing the culture, but also, giving clear signals about behaviors that are maybe small, but will tell a lot about how you respect your employees, how you respect your customers, how you respect people. The example you mentioned about just adding a note and giving an example, I just answer in the morning. It's very simple, but it's significant. But if they don't update performance management, if they don't update the way they are hiring people, the way they treat their employees, maybe in this new world, for example, there is an opportunity to rethink completely the benefits that you give to your employees. Some of the benefits that they were given before maybe do not make sense. So why don't give them benefit thinking about working moms? Thinking about the context that people maybe are more working from home with kids and, they need to go and take, and maybe I want as a father to go and pick up my son at 3 p.m. as long as I can have meeting, right? So for example, so things like that. So this is where leadership is lacking in these organizations.
Agree?
I would also like to jump in with the idea of the toll that technology takes on humans. I read a report recently about why it is so difficult for us, why we feel so tired when we're on Zoom for hours every day. There is like this microseconds of difference between between seeing what the other person is saying or seeing how they're reacting. And that is not our natural state of being. And that without sort of subconsciously, without really being very conscious of it, takes its toll on our psyche and makes us really, really tired because it's not our natural way of behaving and being. And so we have to be cognizant of this and not expect people to be in front of a screen for 8 hours a day. I mean, I find that I am doing this far more than I would in a normal circumstance. And there are natural ways for people. There's plenty of research that talks about the toll that this takes. And I think companies, to Anastasia's point, have to be very cognizant and very aware and make allowances for this. People are people in the end. And if you want the best out of your people, and if you want the best output, you have to take these things into consideration.
Yeah, this concept of digital fatigue is really, we're seeing it, right? So I think it's a trade-off in between this thing about the Parkinson law, right? If you give people 1 hour to complete a task, they will tend to take the whole hour. If you give them 30 minutes, they will try to do in 30 minutes, but people are not owning their calendar as they should. But it's also the job of the leader to give the behavior and say, it's if you pretend people to fill up the calendar with meetings after meetings, that's not healthy. But it's the job of the leader to, for example, coach their team on are those meetings really needed, are necessary? what's the outcome, what's the objective of the meeting. Sometimes people go into meetings after meetings without even thinking. It's just for, talking. But now, from a digital or this new normal perspective, it's really fatiguing. You cannot say 8 hours meeting after meeting. So the job of the leader is there also to implement behaviors that the teams can really feel reassured and comfortable in owning their agenda, and in setting up meetings that we still set meetings that is either 30 minutes or 1 hour. Why is that? I mean, maybe it's 5 minutes is enough, or maybe, and there is never a time now in the digital in between meetings. And why is that? I mean, it's not natural, it's not healthy.
Thanks. There are two things actually I wanted to say. So one is some companies are doing it. For example, Virgin has in the UK, they have 2-hour block for leaders. Well, like Fridays, no meetings, plus 2-hour block when they're not disturbed by any emails. And to actually have thinking space. And that's another thing. Yeah, like when we work with technology, we have so many notifications, emails. Something is always wanting our attention, including probably now most of you are sitting here and doing 100 other things, not the panelists, but people who are watching this, right? And actually, it has been proven people don't really multitask well, and they don't switch between tasks well either. Yeah. What is suffering there is our ability to work deeply. Highly recommend everyone call Newport, MIT, who is researching this topic, has a fantastic book about this. But the point is, leadership really can encourage people and maybe even like have the culture of having some hours that are blocked just for the person to work on their immediate chores. If it ever happened to you that you went with a big to-do list to your computer in the morning, then you spent all day doing something, but by the end of the day, the to-do list just has grown bigger. Yeah, that's not because you were not working well, right? But it's because there are so many small things, and digital communication takes so much longer rather than individual communication in the office, like question that could be solved in 2 minutes. One-on-one discussion will take 20 minutes, emailing back and forth. Yeah, there needs to be some very clear structures. And I think it's the manager job. Like the person should be allowed, or, maybe encouraged to have 2-3 hours a day just blocked. No meetings, no emails, no punishment for not replying straight away unless you're in customer support to actually do your work. And that's about educating managers as well, middle managers especially. Yeah, middle managers often think that digital tools are the tools to keep people on the digital leash, to check again, like the productivity or whatever it is. They're not, right? And it's a paradox because it's the tools that could have been used for freedom to free us up. And actually what we ended up doing, we ended up putting lots of people on digital leashes. Well, this is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I mean, digital should have make our life easier, right? Or free up time for more stuff, right? On one note, we are receiving, for example, a weekly email from Cortana in Microsoft that basically is an analytics on productivity, or aims to be an analytics on productivity. And it's curious because basically it's getting signals from your emails, how fast you respond to emails, when you respond to emails, or your calendar, how many meetings you have, all these signals, right? And of course, it cannot be 100% representative of everything, but it's indicative because it tells you, it gives you some sort of well-being advice, meaning, hey man, you are replying to emails as soon as they come, or you are working 50% of your time in out of your working time, right? Or things like that. They say, why don't you take a break? Why don't you walk more? Why don't you? Which we don't need probably an email or an algorithm to tell us. This is just common sense at some point. But yeah, it was curious to receive these sort of emails and pause for a second and reflect. The first thing is become aware, because a lot of people go into this routine and they're not even aware of that. It becomes really the practice, the way to go, right? And they don't even stop a second and think, hey, wait a second. Am I really this person that I'm chatting with someone else in the same room and I just don't wake up and say, hey, let's go and grab a coffee or things like that?
Great, wow. So you guys are talking about obviously culture, and I love the saying culture eats strategy for breakfast. And And when we talk about transitioning to working from home, we are shifting the culture of the company, especially that we don't know how long this is going to go for. And we just asked the audience, about, linking culture and, linking productivity from working from home, and more than 75, almost 80% of our attendees say that culture, say that working from home actually makes them more productive. And from the other hand, and I mean, there are companies that reported an increased level, and I don't know about your organizations. I'd love to hear more, but there are some companies that reported increased productivity with this working from home business. But then, on the other hand, you have people like Nicholas Bloom, a Stanford economist, who's raising red flags. Although he's one of the most people who are pro working from home and infusing that culture, he's raising red flags and saying, look, this is not sustainable. This is actually gonna cause some cultural erosion. This is gonna impact, people down the line. And my question to all of you is, because we talk about is it working from home good or bad? It's not black or white. It's, in what context do you think working from home is better? And in what context do you think it's worse for productivity and well-being? Anastasia, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I love this topic. So short term can be great, but let's recognize that in the last 6 months, we have not been working from home. We have been surviving. Yeah, that's not how working from home should look like. Working from home is not, sitting in your bathroom closet, trying to isolate from your 2 kids running around. No, that's a wrong idea. So working from home is when you have a room, you have very good Wi-Fi connection, you have an ergonomic chair, and probably a big monitor that some companies provided to their employees and some did not. Some even were expecting them to buy this, and you're comfortable there. I'm not sure what percentage of people who are listening to us had this privilege, but from people I worked with, very few. So let's say that most people still did not have experience of working from home in a normal way. Second one, that has been research. It was done by one of the major Chinese tour operators before the pandemic 2-3 years ago, who have done an experiment, and they have, I think there were more than 1,000 people involved. So they asked them to work from home. They did this for 6 months or so. They were very happy, continued, and then the majority wanted to go back to the office. Why is that? So one thing they noticed is actually people who were not showing up in the office were less frequently promoted. Yeah. We still have this, I don't know whether it's a bias or it's our way of being, that when we see people, like when we show our faces, then we think that the person is kind of ours and they're, more useful. And so in this sense, for example, women, now talking about who has been affected, women who had to work from home, stay with children, actually, they now have lost 1 entire year of an opportunity to be advanced in leadership. And that's something to keep in mind, if you're a leader, and just to know that. They might have been working as hard or even harder. That's at least what I have seen in my practice, working with female employees. But because you could not see them, we tend to assume that probably, they're having leisure time at home. And that's another thing. We should get rid of this concept that working from home is equal to having leisure time. Yeah. Like the fact that my body is here and not somewhere else doesn't mean anything, right? And again, like there is a way to track productivity, and in the UK, for example, there is a huge problem of absenteeism when people physically are in the workplace, but they're not being productive because they're not motivated. Yeah, so the problem is much more complex rather than having physical body here or there, but that's something leaders need to be aware of.
I think that to both your points, there is this idea of ownership of your day and ownership of your productivity to a big part. So yes, I mean, of course, people are happy, or initially are happy, that they don't have to commute for hours. They don't have to spend time getting dressed and going and coming. And so initially it feels great, like, yeah, I can work from home. It's wonderful. But then it starts wearing on you. It becomes tiring to be alone, because sometimes some of our best work is through interaction, normal interaction with others. So possibly this is teaching us, what we're going through right now is probably teaching us what we need to reconfigure work in such a way to give people some kind of ownership over their working day. So people, when they have the choice, they don't have to be home or they don't have to be at work. What is being asked of them is, what have you produced? So the measurement system, as Roberto was talking about, has to be different. The evaluation has to be different. So and to Anastasia's point also, that. So if companies are more aware that they are more biased towards people who actually show up physically, then they can adjust for that. So the idea of rethinking how we think about work, how we think about I love the what Anastasia said about putting people on a digital leash, because that's what it feels like, I think, for a lot of people. Like, okay, I was speaking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago, quite high up in her organization. And I said, well, how do you organize your time? And she said, 9 to 5, I'm on the computer, and I'm thinking, why does it have to be 9 to 5? Why can't you be more human? Like, you're at home, you don't have to be stuck to a computer at 9 to 5. So, but these old structures, and this again, I want to talk a bit about our resistance to change. We're so ingrained in doing things in a particular way that we just want to take this and just apply it to that. And working from home is very, very different. For so many reasons. So maybe a combination, maybe this is teaching us that we have to think about a combination of things and how much we can trust people to do their work. As Anastasia was saying, I mean, in my experience, there's a lot of people who show up and do an 8-hour day and do very little, and maybe somebody sitting at home can do 2 hours and can be as productive. So it's just something to think about.
Yeah, and if I may chime in as well, you mentioned the right word, I think, Salma, it's trust. Mm-hmm. And it starts from the leadership. It starts from the people you hire. It starts from the way you treat your employees, from everything. So that's key. The other thing that I would add just is, to me, it's also a matter of choice, because, for example, when I joined Google 2009, at that time, we as employees were allowed to work from home. It was part of the culture. And at the time, very few companies were adopting that sort of style, but it was a choice. I was not forced to. So I could choose, maybe tomorrow, because of this and that, I can organize my time. And because I was measured on outcome, on impact. Nobody cared if from where I was working. In fact, I would even reframe the whole narrative. This office, work from home. Now you see people that are taking vacations that are, they don't know if they need to put an out of office or out of home or whatever. But I wouldn't make it office or home. I would even take the chance to reimagine the future and say, hey, let's work from anywhere. Who cares if you are at home? Or why don't we do meeting walking? I used to do, we have a small lake in front of so we were doing a lot of meetings, walking around that. Why not? I mean, what's the point of being, it's super productive, actually. And ideas flows better. It's also, you're also walking, so you don't stay, in the chair for 8 hours. There are people that don't stand at all. So they go in the office, and there are people or cultures that they eat at their desk, which for us, food is embedded in our culture. So it's something I cannot really understand. So in fact, there was, I listened recently to an interview to Sundar, the CEO of Alphabet, Google. He was talking that maybe it will not be that employees will go back to offices. In his perspective, for example, was thinking, as before we were doing offsites. So we were maybe going somewhere else and group the people that were working remotely and spend time together to discuss the vision, et cetera, and the main initiatives. Maybe now it's the time to do insights, where people are at home or everywhere, and they go to the office when there is a need to physically meet with people. For example, with my team during the recent months, we were way more productive for example, when we wanted to define the strategy and then brainstorm a little bit, we went to each other's house, whiteboard, physical whiteboard, the three people together that, that physical interaction as an alchemy that you cannot replace in the digital world, no matter what, because you feel the people, right? So you look at the people in a different. So that justifies, for example, to get there together and meet each other. Then, but for the rest of the time, maybe it doesn't make sense. So why shall we stick to a model that was working maybe years ago? So to me, is work from anywhere, is rethinking, reimagining the whole experience, and allowing choice, because that's the point. Otherwise, it's not work from home. I agree. It's everybody's forced to do, and it's a never-ending process.
I would like to, if I may, jump in also with just a proviso that when we talk about these structures, these new structures that you, Roberto, are talking about, it sounds a little bit to me, well, not a little bit, a lot, that this is kind of like the privileged middle management up type of situation. So that's one thing. So we have to also keep thinking about the less advantage, even within an organization. I'm not just talking about socioeconomically. That's one thing. The other thing is, we have to think about, so I have in my mind the gig economy. There was a lot of talk about gig economy. It's great getting people to do work whenever they want, this and that. Yes, but what did it take away from people? It took away healthcare. It took away security. And I think Anastasia spoke to this. And so I am imagining now, okay, people meeting in their homes. That's great. I mean, on a personal level, I think that's great. But what if there is a reason a person isn't, whatever, their home is, swarming with children or not up to par in their minds, so are we compensating people then for using their own private space and, etc., and equipping them with equipment and compensating them? So these are all the challenges that this new modality brings. And so I would like to just say that we really, from my perspective, always have to think about, okay, that's great for us. Like we can do this, right? But what about the other people who are, I don't know, the drivers, the people who are not in management, and the people who are not as advantaged as many of us are. So just wanted to bring this to the table.
And I want to add
or
to that
even
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say on this point of Salma, or even people who are just starting their jobs, right? Usually people who have the most freedom, for example, not to reply to emails or to skip the meetings, are people who are senior or have a very particular qualification. For example, they're a rare programmer. Usually it has been the case that they didn't have to show up in the office. If you're kind of, early starter, if your role is very like admin role, yeah, good luck with trying to say, I'm not going to attend this meeting. I will see how long you're going to last there. Yeah. So then, the culture has to be inclusive, right? It cannot be flexible culture, but by the way, like once you're a director and up.
Yeah. And to add to that concern is, how many companies are like Google, who have these sophisticated data analytics tools and that have such an upskilled workforce, right? And if I want to take this example, Roberto, that you spoke about, and infuse it into, I don't know, Salma's, or one of the organizations Salma worked with or Anastasia worked with, that are less sophisticated, that don't have the upskilling necessary for such a deployment of culture. And so what would you say to our audience who might not be the Googlers of the world or the Microsofts of the world? How do they deal with that? And where do they start?
Again, I would start personally. I would start from the way leaders measure performance and incentivize their people. Because again, okay, you might not be the Google or Microsoft of the world, which of course have more means to implement such things, right? But at the end of the day, even if you are a different company, different organization, how you are treating your employees and how you take care of your employees, you don't necessarily have to be a Google, how you are, how you are measuring the impact of your employees or the performance of your employees. That doesn't have to do with, the scale that you have or the fact that you are, keep growing quarter after quarter. So it's the way you really care about, because most of these organizations, first of all, in my experience, there is a concept of they're not even aware of. So that's the first thing. So do a sort of a step back, take some time to look at you with different eyes from distance, and see how you are operating today, how you are treating your employees. So this is the first thing: self-awareness of where you're at. And then I would say, yes, think about your employees as humans, and would you do the same thing to yourself? And this doesn't happen all the time. And these things, I guess, every single company can do. Then, of course, some programs require funding and budget to implement, but most of the things, I mean, as long as you, it's a matter of trust, as we said before. So if you don't trust your employees, there is a problem that is fundamental, even before we talk about where to work from. And actually, this is probably the point. And if you reward your employees because you don't trust them, and they have to be at the office because they are maybe in a junior position, so they have to, there is another problem there, that the problem is there with leadership. So, and you don't have to be a Google or a Microsoft to do anything of this. It's what are your values? It's about, we need a generation of human-centered leaders. Leaders that ground their decision-making on values, on principles, and they set the behaviors and they live by those behaviors. So, and they lead by example. So, and you don't have to be Google or Microsoft to set this. It has to start from the source, from the top, right? I mean, this is my point of view.
I agree. I totally agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to jump in with I'm a bit of a troublemaker, but I want to talk about, okay, so I was having this conversation with a young man or a few days ago who has a startup, and he was saying to me, listen, I would love to be able to be socially conscious, and I would love to be able to be environmentally conscious as a company, but the competition out there is, killer, and I can't afford to, as a young company, I can't afford to be spending time and effort and bandwidth, right? Thinking about these things. Now, if there was like an environmental tax, say, or something, or like a public policy or something, a law that says you have to do this or that or the other thing, then it levels the playing field. Then I and every other company has to take that into consideration. Where you're asking me to be, to put in that investment of time and money and whatever, maybe Google, Microsoft, these guys have, deeper pockets and are able to do that, right? And can afford to do that. But when you're in a very competitive environment and there is nothing that is forcing you and to do something, like, to take your employees into consideration, you might think of it as, you're losing a competitive edge. You're putting your resources in the wrong place. So this is, of course, in an ideal scenario, I totally agree with you. And I think this is absolutely necessary. The reality of it is that people feel that this is a luxury. Oftentimes. Now, so I don't think it's a luxury myself, but I mean, the prevalent thinking or feeling, people will say things like, they'll say, yeah, we're all for this or that, or for, providing our employees, we really care and all this. But in practice, they don't. And that creates a dissonance also for the employees. Like, you're saying one thing, you're doing something else. You're telling me you're going to evaluate me based on output, but in fact, you are, bean counting the time that I'm spending at the office or whatever. So it's these things, they sound very nice. And I totally, I would love to see a working culture like that. The reality of it is that, and maybe the middle managers, maybe even the top managers, but people don't, because the fear, again, we talk about the fear permeates, because the junior employee, yes, he has a middle manager. The middle manager is worried about the top manager and so on. So fear permeates, and people usually operate out of fear. But the fear is not unfounded, is what I'm trying to say. That there are things to take into consideration when we're asking people, even leaders, to become more inclusive, give their employees more space, etc. How is this positioning them internally, competitively, and as far as the company is concerned? I don't know if my point is clear, but yeah.
If you may answer to your point. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Anastasia.
Well, I just wanted to say that, well, they need to do the research, right? I think there is a pretty obvious, like in terms of productivity, there is a pretty obvious link, right? Like if your employees are burning out and you have a huge retention rate, or if your people are not being productive, then probably something is wrong, right? You need to do something about it. The fact that if they're not, like, they're just using the wrong measurement to measure productivity, well, it's something that they need to think about, right? What is the measurement of productivity? The number of emails? So, like I don't know what, like the guy you were talking to, what he does, like the lines of the finished code or whatever it is, like it's, if you work in customer support, probably it's a number of emails or like in the speed with which you answer. But, it's just like, and I think that's the question to the leader, like, does each of you have an idea of what productivity means? Like how do you know the person? Or even like, I don't like even the term productivity, because in some, like if you're an intellectual worker, like how are you being productive or not? How do you know your employee is successful in each of their job? What defines success? And does your understanding correspond to their understanding? Very simple thing. And it has to be measurable. It's like just like you have to have your KPIs in some way. Sorry.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Anastasia. And back to your point, Salma. I work with a lot of startups. You mentioned the example of the startup before. I see a lot of startups that don't know how to hire because they have this excuse that they're focused about the competition, they're focused about this and that. But then when they start hiring, they hire very wrong. And it's their fault. It's the fault of the founder. It's not that at Google this is nice and it was easy to do. This is something that is a limit of the person. I've been seeing entrepreneurs during the pandemic that, for example, they sent to their customers a kind of COVID pack kind of thing. So it was a nice gift. So when I opened the door and I received it and say, wow. And I spoke with the founder and he said, there is no better time we can focus on our customers. And this is not Google or Microsoft. This is a startup, an entrepreneur. So back to your example of the other entrepreneur, I would question him, man, first of all, why are you so focused on the competition? Everybody. So the other thing is people think about competition completely wrongly. It's maybe those that you're thinking competitors are not even your competitors. I've seen this mistake many times. So to me, it's a matter of principles first. So if you really, exactly what Anastasia was saying, in my opinion, how you define productivity, how do you define success? How many companies, how many startups, for example, or many companies set clear objectives and results to achieve for their team in a way that comes from the top, so everyone is contributing to the same goal? Not many. And if you ask them, oh, I don't have time. But then it comes most of the times that the people are executing things that they don't know why. That's a real problem. This is not Microsoft, Google, nice to have. This is companies that are not able to operate, or they don't have the right leaders on the top, or they're not. And if they're not spending time on these things because they are too obsessed or too taken too much with the competition, maybe they should review the way they're spending their time, because it's extremely important for startups, for example, to hire the right team, especially the first 10 employees, right? Mm-hmm. So how come you don't have time to think about your people, your team, and you're thinking about the competition? That's completely wrong in my opinion. I would challenge this entrepreneur, to understand a little bit better why is that, and to rethink the way he's approaching his business.
Well, I mean, this is what I was trying to make a point that I'm not saying that this is accurate perception, but perception sometimes is reality. And so this whole idea of leadership and what it means, and and principle-led or value-led leadership is very, very important. And spreading that kind of culture, because we do have a toxic culture in many, many organizations. This needs to change. But as long as people have that perception all the time, so the more people talk about what leadership is and what it entails, and how really looking after your people means they look after you. And it's not a one side, it's not a one. I remember some years ago, a person, so I worked for a while in the healthcare sector, and I remember how shocked I was at the expression. He said to me, I want to create McDonaldization of healthcare. And to my mind, it was like, what are you talking about? Healthcare is not McDonald's. You can, like, I understand the idea of efficiency and all that, but there has to be that human element, because we are human, we're not machines, and that has to always factor in my opinion.
Excellent. Thank you guys for sharing these thoughts. I mean, I'm rethinking some things now. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that, you know, in the digital world now is also a buzzword. It's outsourcing. It has been really, but now more than ever is outsourcing, right? Whether it's IT outsourcing, business process outsourcing, or over reliance on external consultants and bringing in people, right? It's cheaper, sometimes more convenience, gives you more access. So when we talk about, like, on the other hand, when we talk about, you know, culture and a digital culture, how important is it for a leader to create and sustain the culture of your organization? Like, you know, today when I outsource my, I don't know, HR or my marketing or my IT support, am I actually outsourcing my leadership? And how much of my leadership am I outsourcing? I don't know, Anastasia, Salma, or Roberto, if you'd like to speak to that.
I'm happy to.
Pick one.
Oh,
Yeah.
well,
So,
you go, Salma.
No, I wasn't gonna say anything. Go ahead.
Thank you. The technology. Okay. So I think it's not just outsourcing to humans. I think what we should understand that we are now in a very important phase when we are outsourcing more and more of human capabilities to technology. In our real lives, yeah, like we have the wearables that are telling us, you know, oh, you're feeling nervous, or, you know, like as Roberto was saying, the program that says has take a break, although in theory it's my body that should tell this to me. Yeah, there is even an app that tells you now when to go to pee during a movie break. Sorry to say that. So, you know, like in theory it should be like our own bodies, but we're trusting devices more. Like we trust devices to remember things for us, yet to plan things for us, to recommend to us. For example, lots of decisions are now about mortgages are taken by devices. You probably know that in the American court system, it's the AI that recommends whether to put people in the jail and things like that. Yeah, so it's not science fiction, it's actually what's happening. And the same thing is happening in the corporate world, right? Like we're outsourcing more and more, not just jobs, but certain functions of the jobs to technology. And then this is an interesting question, you know, what is happening to the leadership and what is it that you are leading in this case, right? And what is happening to the vision? Because when you take away, for example, from people the power to make a decision, yeah, and when you're leaving them the role of being an operator and pushing the buttons, what is happening? There is a good example. So there are, you know, like there are two major airline producers, Boeing's and Airbus. So one, remind me which is which, I don't know, but so one of them, basically everything is driven by human and technology is supporting that. And then the other one, everything is driven by technology and the human is there just in case. So more and more organizations, I see the second one. So the question is, who is the pilot and what's the pilot doing? Yeah, is the pilot still a leader or not? Yeah, or is it technology and leader? And then if it's technology a leader, the real leader is who is controlling this technology, right? So it's probably like the company to whom you're paying this fee. So that's an interesting one. So for me, you know, the human-centered approach we were talking about earlier is about focusing on like what makes your team human capabilities really great, and where technology can support you in that. And then the question is, what do you need to outsource and what you don't? What do you need? Yes, it might be cheaper, but does it mean it's better? Yeah. Does it mean, and why are you doing this business? Are you doing it to make money? Are you doing it to create jobs? Are you doing it because you have a shared purpose and you're working towards something? Yeah. It's very easy to do a business just, by setting up everything automatically. In coaching business, you have so many, leads. I use LinkedIn. I get like 20 invitations per day that are trying to sell me something, and it's automated messages. They don't even look at my profile that says, please don't send any pitches. But what kind of impression does it create in other people? And these are very relevant questions that each of us will have to answer to ourselves 5-10 years from now, because the trade-off is between the cost and the speed that technology offers, and like the humans that are probably not so efficient, but maybe they have something else. That's up to you to decide what is it that humans add to your business.
And Salma, in your case, thank you so much, Anastasia. And Salma, in your case, you're the one sometimes, I mean, both of you, sometimes you're the one being outsourced. So you're, and when you work with clients, Salma, in your case on immunity to change, how much of their leadership, how much of, their leadership in the sense of like creating, people's strategies is lent to you? And, how do you reconsolidate that?
I think coaching is not about having decision-making or leadership outsourced. It's about helping an organization find its own strength. And I'm sure Anastasia, who's also a coach, would agree on this. So you don't come in with answers, you come in with questions. You try to ask the right questions to trigger thinking in perhaps a different way or on a different plane. So that's the role of a coach. And you try to lead people to solve their own problem. I mean, that is leadership in a way, because a leader, it doesn't come in, as we said initially, with answers. He's a cookie cutter solution to every problem, but rather, okay, every problem is a unique problem, and how are you addressing it? And let's see if you can, you shed a light, or you help people think in a different way. But that's what you do. You don't think for them. You help them to think through their problem. So that's what I would have to say about that.
Well, on my side, look, last week I spent almost 30 minutes to talk with a robot from a telco operator. I guess I cannot mention, but there was no way that that the robot was understanding what I really needed, and there was no way he connected me to a human. Right? Is that the right outsourcing? Do I trust this company? Do I have another choice? I don't know. So to me, first of all, there are definitely technology is evolving, right? So a lot of processes are being automated. So what I would not outsource is definitely human capital that is serving my purpose as a company, right? So because even creativity and soft skills will be more in demand. So that is the component that is, I want to nurture, for example. In this world, for example, I wouldn't go beyond the concept of outsourcing. I would talk more about partnerships. So, and I would make the conversation about value. So where is that I can have a partner that I can build on top of his skills? I don't want to reinvent the wheel. If there is someone that built a solution that served my purpose, I'm totally happy to partner, but there needs to be a value conversation. I don't just think to reduce cost. Maybe the solution is adding value to my business, or I can build something on top of the solution without restarting from scratch. There is this world of APIs, right, where I can get the data or the output of a system and build on top of that. So this concept also of growth mindset. And the last consideration I would make around outsourcing or partnerships is about the responsibility. The responsibility that you as a leader has comes the responsibility, first of all, to who. So sometimes you focus on one stakeholder, but the stakeholders are it's a wider network of stakeholders. So, and also most likely we have this conversation like the outsourcing one. We look at the business from just one lens, which is the business lens, right? So it's a kind of profit cost or profitability analysis or whatever it is. But it's also, an ethic. There is also an ethical lens and a legal lens that should be considered at the same time as the business lens when leaders are going to make these decisions, whether to outsource or partner or make it any sort of decision. And the last consideration I would say is the whole decision making today is not updated. As we talk about the performance management, but the whole decision making is not updated. If you think about public traded companies, decisions are still taken quarterly, right? So results are communicated quarterly. So, and that's because historically the CFO was able to get aggregated data every quarter, and the results are reported annually, and so on and so forth. Is this relevant today? Today, how many organizations are able to set up a culture of experimentation? The usual concept of A/B testing. It's so easy in the digital world to test out things, get some data, make a more informed decision that doesn't replace gut feeling. You have your expertise and, but how many leaders are implementing this sort of culture? And today, the data is more granular, is more real time, and companies are still operating as if, they can only be, these elephants or dinosaurs every quarter, every year. And then you see with the pandemic, you need to take decisions probably faster. So maybe a world of partnerships and more agility in and more experimentation decision-making is something that should be implemented by organizations.
Yeah. Can I just add, there is a comment from the audience that says, any business aims to make profit and growth. Once strategic goals to achieve the purpose of the business are clear, they could be achieved by any means. As long as they're achieved, it doesn't matter how. I will politely disagree, not just because there are B Corps, and non-profits, but actually, if you think about the reputation of the company, you know that, for example, companies who did not comply, like with Black Lives Matter movement, like their profits would go down, or companies who like we were talking to earlier that that lots of companies now that don't have the diversity, they actually don't get the funding anymore. So there is a very big component of vision and values, and this is a job of the leader, and more that's happening. The success of the companies is not measured just by money. If we took Google and Microsoft, and then and if they made some kind of statements that would not be aligned with the values of their users, guess what will happen to their shares? Although they're making really good money with ads, it's not something that sustainable.
Can I bring in another, I know we're coming to the end, but there is something that concerns me with technology as well. And the ability of big technology companies to understand and create algorithms and pander to our opinions and this idea of polarizing people. I mean, I find that very dangerous in society, and that's maybe a different discussion at a different time, but I just wanted to bring it up because what we end up doing, because we're, as Anastasia was saying, we're always on our phones and we're always with our things, that's what we're interacting with, and it's feeding us what we want to hear and what we're interested in. So the danger also of technology is this, in a way, there's the illusion that it gives you a wider lens on the world. But in fact, what is happening is that it is becoming far less wide, and it's becoming much more polarized. And so this whole idea of humans becoming irrelevant, I think, is very, very dangerous. And so humans with their values and hopefully, as civilization advances, values hopefully will advance, but these values of diversity and listening to the other and so on, these have to be very carefully nurtured when technology is involved, because what technology does on its own is it does what is best, what you want it to do. Like if I only want to hear people who agree with me, that's what's going to happen. And what kind of world are we going to end up with? So it is up to us humans to always bring technology back to where we want it to serve us. And that's something that we lose sight of because it's so seductive. It is so seductive. I mean, it's just, giving you information, YouTube videos, whatever stuff you want to hear. So I stopped hearing other people. Just wanted to kind of bring that on board.
No, and related to that, thank you, Salma. And no, there's a question from the audience that states, and this is also the audience. You can post any questions you want now. There's a question saying, do you think that the adoption of advanced technologies like AI and machine learning and whatnot by big companies will lead to polarization of future jobs? So just beyond even polarization of opinion and and what you're exposed to, is it going to polarize jobs in the future? What are your thoughts?
Well, I can talk about this. You know which job is less likely to be outsourced out of all? It's not what you think, it's the cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
And you know why? Because it's very difficult to create an algorithm that can tackle so many different corners and configurations, which is horrible, isn't it? There is a research by Nesta 2015 that forecasts that 47% of the jobs in the US will be outsourced to technology by 2030. 47%. And in the UK, I think it's about 35, if I'm not mistaken. So, between half and third of you basically will lose the jobs wherever you're joining from, whose jobs have a more creative component. And by creative, I mean not writing necessarily, or painting, but rather being able to take the decisions outside of the box, being able to think outside of the box, is the main thing. But I think we will see a lot of jobs where the human, role is reduced just to pushing the buttons without understanding how the whole thing works. And unfortunately, this is already what we see in the gig economy. A lot of that, so the labor, the value of the human labor is actually going down. We'll probably have very few jobs, very sophisticated, who really need to understand, because technology is so complex, right? There is no single human who understands how AI works now, and it's going to be progressing. So I'm afraid that there will be even lower. There is forecast that says that we will have more human, jobs related to other humans, but there is one problem with it. Are these jobs going to create economic value?
Yes.
Or is technology going to create economic value? And then the whole economy structure will need to be rethought. That's a very political question.
Absolutely. And definitely considering that is looking at also, what skills in the market and where do you need to develop people, right? It's not just technology taking over our jobs, but it's also how are we upskilling ourselves, and
Haneen, upskill ourselves or reskill might lose their job, which is important. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm conscious we're running out of time. We only have 6 minutes to go. So there's one question directed to Anastasia on the digital culture that you were talking about, and about that, for the example you gave of your neighbor that was onboarded on a TV with 50 screens, and these people were turning off their cameras. How would you propose a different solution? What should happen today with what we're in today, with the corona situation, right? And how do you address that without making all these, because typically you don't have 50 people in the room when you're onboarded, but it's so how do you address that? So if you can speak to that quickly, and then we want to go back to our closing remarks so we can close on time.
Well, I think one of the things, that you're suggesting, just have your own video and just to say hi. Another one is just to split them on small groups and, get them having a conversation, about what each of them does. Maybe just asking, hey, can you tell him, what's her role, so that they has a sense. I don't know, informal aperitivo, in the evening, just get everyone grab, whatever they have, a cup of coffee, tea, champagne, whatever the culture is. I mean, it's a question of how do you use these tools? Do you use them as interactive tools, or do you use them as just, the radio that's speaking there?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we're down to our last 5 minutes. I want to thank you all for the discussion and thank the audience for the insights and the questions they posed. So now my final question to you, if you could take a minute and a half to just kind of, we have our audience is watching this and they're probably like thinking about all these things, but now what is one thing you want them to take away from? What is one thing you're telling them as leaders or ones that, kind of work with leaders, on what to rethink when it comes to leadership? So what's one thing you want them to rethink about? I'm saying think too many times. Yeah. So we'll start with Roberto.
Sure, absolutely. So one thing is definitely about being comfortable to be vulnerable as a leader and being comfortable with not having all the answers. This is probably where we started from, also the conversation. But that's one key thing that I think it's really something that leadership at large is still lacking. So giving it to leadership a more human dimension, while still talking about being authentic, but effective authenticity. Because if you are authentic still, that might not be enough. So it's this concept of effective authenticity that can bring leadership to really talk to humans and to care about your people, your employees, your customers, respect them, and put them in the first place.
Anastasia?
Humans first, technology second. It's my vision for that. Think humans are, they're faulty, they're not perfect, but yet, we're all humans. We have right to make mistakes. What can you do as a leader to leverage the strong sides of your people, and where can technology support their weaker sides? Something to think about when you're undergoing digital transformation.
Salma?
Okay. Well, I would like to begin by saying that I am very upset to hear that the last thing that can be outsourced or technology take over is cleaning, because that's the one thing that I think it should do. That's what humans can do without having to do. But anyway, so I think that for me, the one thing I would like people to take away with is to keep in mind two things. One is, who are we leaving behind when we talk about technology and the uses of technology? So always having in mind the disparity that technology can create, and also to approach technology critically. Technology is a wonderful thing. It can open many, many windows to the world, but approaching it critically and not taking it on like a given, and becoming a bit, what is the word? To kind of differentiate or be selective about how you use technology, so that it's being pushed at you all the time. But you have to create that screen and that filter for your own personal self to maintain, well, your humanity and your sanity and your mental health. So that's what and I think it falls to leaders also to remind exactly, I mean, going back to the stuff we were talking about, that a leader in an organization should make the space for people to not be taken up by technology, by the emails, and to make space for their humanity. So that's what I would end with.
Well, thank you all for this discussion and for your input and insights. And I want to thank the audience as well for their insights and for attending, and the C20 team. Thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing evening or day like Salma. I hope, and we apologize for waking you up this early. Thank you so much. Thank you, Roberto, Anastasia, and Salma.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your breakfast, Salma.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, bye.